Hello everyone, welcome to the Habitat for Humanity Great Britain International Women's Day event. Thank you so much for joining us. We wanted to take today as an opportunity to think about and reflect upon some of the challenges that women face around the world, but also to celebrate the achievements that are being made and the changes that are happening driven by women in their own communities. We're going to be joined from some women leaders from across the Habitat network to talk more about this, so I'll hand over to them shortly. But before we get started, I just wanted to draw your attention to the Ask a Question function at the bottom of the screen, where you can send a direct message and I can respond to you directly. So I do encourage you to use that during the event. I'm really pleased to hand over now to a women leader from within our own Habitat network here in Great Britain, our Chair of Trustees, Nicola Barclay. We're really happy that she's joining us today to welcome you and our speakers to this event. Thank you.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world, and welcome to the Habitat for Humanity Great Britain's International Women's Day 2023 event. Thank you, Gemma, for your kind words and your introduction. I am Nicola Barclay, as Gemma said. I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees for Habitat GB, and it's my great pleasure to introduce this event to you all today. Thank you for joining us online, wherever you are. I'm not going to speak for too long. We've got three amazing speakers coming up, and I want to give them the airtime that they really deserve. They've got some amazing stories to tell you. But I thought it was maybe useful just to introduce the session and frame it within the International Women's Day theme, which is equity over equality this year. And I think it's really important to understand the difference between both. Equality is where we have laws which are fair for everybody. There's no actual discrimination against women or minority groups. But equity is actually where we go that step further to give people who are disadvantaged an extra step up, really, an extra helping hand. There's a wonderful picture on the International Women's Day website, actually, and it shows you three people all trying to look over a wall. And equality would be if you gave every one of them a box of the same size so they could stand on it to look over. But if you're smaller, you can't see over. So equity actually is you give somebody a box of the size that allows them to look over the wall. And that, to me, is such a lovely, simple demonstration of the difference between equality, we all get the same, and equity, you get what is needed for you to manage to do whatever it is that you want to do. And we'll hear examples from our speakers about what they are doing in their communities in Zambia, in Nepal, and Anne actually is speaking from the US, but is giving us examples of Habitat's work throughout the world and what they are doing to enable women specifically to get that extra step up that they need. I originally became involved with Habitat in a wonderful event called a Women's Build. And I went to India, to a place near Mumbai, to help build a home for a family. I came together with another 20 women from all over the world. We'd never met before, and we all came together and helped to build this home in a very small rural setting. And it was really clear to me that the women in that community were there to support each other. They all stopped doing what they were doing in their own homes and came to help, whether it was feeding the labourers, feeding us, just helping moving bricks around the site, whatever it was, they were there to help each other. And that sense of community really stayed with me afterwards. I was speaking to the mother who was going to be the beneficiary of this home, asking her what was the most important thing that she would get as a result of this house. And she told me that her two young boys would be able to do their homework on the floor of the house without worrying about them being bitten by scorpions or snakes. Now that really just put it into context for me. Everything she was doing was for her children, to enhance her education opportunities, just to give them a better life. And I can remember coming home and telling my own children that these were the kind of real challenges that other children around the world face. And, you know, we are from a very privileged society, and it would never occur to me that my kids might be stung by a scorpion while trying to do their homework. But it just shows that it doesn't matter where you are in the world, women have the same concerns. Are my kids getting the right education? Am I providing a home that is safe, secure, and comfortable for them? And I hope you will get the messages today that we are this wonderful, big international community of women there to support each other. Thank you for your support to date. I know you're all supporters of Habitat, hence the reason you're on the call. I'm going to stop talking, and I really hope you enjoy the sessions that we've got ahead. I think we'll have some time for questions, and I will come back to you at the end and wrap up. But thank you.
I'm Ruth Mitimingi Navutali, project management specialist. I have 18 years of experience in managing different projects across Zambia. I'm a holder of an MBA in management. I also have a bachelor's degree in social work, and I also did a certificate in journalism. I'm currently holding the head of programs position for Habitat for Humanity Zambia, and my key focus areas include strategic development. I also do lots of project management and support. I engage in proposal development, advocacy, reporting, project team management, partner management, and all. And I've been with Habitat for 6 years now, since 2017. If you look at women's inequality, it's broad, and there are so many issues around that. But I'll focus more on looking basically to issues to do with land and property ownership. So if you look at in the Zambian context, we have the National Gender Policy of 2014. We also have the National Housing Policy of 2020 and National Land Policy of 2021. Despite all these policies in place, women in Zambia still continue to face phenomenal inequalities when it comes to land and property ownership. And again, when you look at this issue, it's actually being fueled by two aspects that I want to talk to as the main challenges that women face. So the first one is basically patriarch society, and the second one, I'll basically look at the systematic marginalization. So when it comes to patriarch society, it's a system where society, it's a system in society where men hold the powers and women are largely excluded. In our context, it's actually cultural and as well as traditionally. It is a form of respect for men as the head of household. So you take a man and put them as head. So you have that respect for a man as the head of a household, such that when land and property registration issues come to play, you actually find that because of that respect that is given to man in a household setup, you will find that all the land is actually registered in the name of a man or a male dominant in that household at the expense of actually the female counterparts. So you will find that most of the times women actually are excluded from accessing land and owning property. We did a survey as Habitat for Humanity Zambia in 2021, where we actually show results that indicated that there was actually very low percentage of women that actually had their property registered in their names, either as individuals or with their spouse as joint ownership. The results actually showed just about 6% of women that had property registered in their names. So already you can see that this is a big issue. So the patriarch society has actually disadvantaged a lot of women from accessing land and also own property. The second aspect I want to talk to is basically the systematic marginalization. In practice, there are no deliberate measures taken by the states or private sector agencies to ensure women register their land or property with their spouses. So in this case, we're looking at joint ownership. Despite the Deed and Registry Act allowing for women to register for land jointly with their spouses or male relatives, this provision is actually on voluntary basis. So there's no one that can come to you to compel you to actually apply as a joint entity. So it's voluntary. So if the man still feels, yes, I'm the head of the house and I can do it, they'll still go ahead and do it, and there's not much you can do because it's on voluntary basis. So you need to agree with your spouse that, yes, we need to go in this as a joint venture. So again, when you look at the gender status report of 2012, 2014, it showed that 24.8% of the state land offers were actually given to women. That was in 2013, and that 74% of the women aged between 15 and 49 years did not own land in the urban areas. Again, women, especially in informal business, are still subjected to formal collateral requirements, such as bank statements or certificate of title to access any microfinance support. So again, you can see that these two key challenges that the women face in the communities that we work in. But again, when you look at what are the positive actions that we are calling out to address these inequalities. As Habitat for Humanity Zambia, we've had quite a number of projects and activities that aim to address some of these issues that I talked to. So for instance, we have what we call dialogue forums. This Habitat believes in roundtable and plenary discussions. We bring in the civil leaders, we bring in government officials. As opposed to being antagonistic and confrontational, we actually bring and engage them to actually talk and deliberate on issues that come from the community. And also the forum brings all key stakeholders, so no one is left behind. All key stakeholders gather to basically discuss issues and also come up with collective actions going forward. An example I'd give is we had in one of the provinces and one of the districts that we are operating in, where we had the mayor of the city coming in to help in expediting the issuance of occupants licenses. And also because there were issues of delays here and there. And when the issue was brought to the attention through the dialogue forums, this was actually quickly worked on. And now we see the issuance of licenses being like a straightforward process for women as well as any interested party. Then another thing that also is key into us bringing the gap, reducing the gap of inequality is that we have been facilitating study circle groups. It's a methodology where we provide a platform for women in the community to come together and discuss issues pertaining to land and housing rights. So this is basically a safe space for women to come and discuss what issues they are finding pertaining to land and housing rights, as well as for other marginalized groups within the community. And we have seen an increase in the number of women actually owning security of tenure documents, either as individuals or in joint ownership with their spouses. So this is also among the things that we've been doing at community level to ensure that, first of all, information is shared with the right people in the right platforms, equip the women, have the coordinated voice within the community where people come together in a safe space to basically discuss issues pertaining to land and housing rights. So this has also worked very well at a community level because we've been building their capacity to speak about issues that pertain to their welfare and also escalate these issues to decision makers at a much higher level. So you're looking at basically local government level or provincial level or the powers that be in terms of making decisions in land and housing rights. Then again, perhaps you'd want to know what are some of the gains that we've seen in terms of some of the projects that we have been implementing. Like I stated earlier, Habitat has been implementing projects that focus on women's access to land and economic empowerment. And in terms of numbers, I would speak to some of the statistics that we've gathered on the ground. And part of it, we are looking at where we've built capacity of over 18,000 people. And again, this is through their participation in study circles, which is focusing mainly on land and housing rights. And out of the 18,000, we are actually seeing about 80% are women. So already you can see that these women are actually being built. Their capacity is actually increasing in terms of how do I understand my rights in terms of land and housing? How do I go about solving these problems that we have pertaining to land and housing rights? And you hold each other accountable. So there is a role that I need to play as a woman in the community. There's also a role that needs to be played by the local authorities. So once they understand the different roles and what they need to do, they can now easily hold the government accountable to some of these rights that they need to have access to. So we have seen a good number of women actually participating and articulating issues pertaining to land and housing rights. And again, this is what we are proud to say. We have seen a number of women actually pursuing, those that are in marriage, for instance, pursuing the issue to have joint ownership of land documents. And I think we are also seeing a lot of women coming up in that line. And majority of them are actually trying to see whether they can have joint ownership of these documents, which was not so in the past because it was male dominated. And you see everything, it's a man that actually holds on to land documentation. So we've seen that change in terms of mindset, both from a male perspective as well as from women's perspective. They now know their rights and they know how to approach their spouses in the issuance of joint certificate of title. Another thing also that we have seen is that we've seen women still talking to security of tenure document. We've actually seen women, like over 1,500 women that have security of tenure documents. And these are exclusively women, where we have over 1,500 that have access to security of tenure documents owned by a woman, which is very impressive.
Ruth, thank you so much for that run through of the amazing work that you're doing in Zambia. One of the first things you mentioned was about it being a patriarchal society, and that was some of the reasoning behind the real low levels of women having land and property rights. I'm interested to know how the men are coping with this change. Are they supportive? Is there a pushback from the men? Have you found challenges that you maybe weren't expecting at the beginning of the program?
Yes, it's been a process. And I think, like, mindset change, behavioral change is not something that you easily achieve. But then when you look at some of the interventions that we have been implementing in different communities, have actually helped to relay the message in a correct way and correct format to the men. So you'll find that even in study circles, we have men that actually do participate. And also, we also empower women to know how to talk to their spouses. So you are not confrontational, but let them also understand what are the benefits of me being part of this joint ownership of property. For instance, we have seen cases where when the man dies, the woman actually becomes homeless. The property is actually, the relatives of the man will actually get that property and leave you and the children homeless. So we have seen a lot of evidence around that we capture and also try to empower or create awareness to the male folks so that they do understand that these are the implications if you actually still hold on to this patriarch mentality. So we are seeing that change, and a lot of men are actually being supportive. There are actually other men who would say, I have no problems with my husband, that my wife actually owns this property. I don't have a problem because she's the mother of the children and she can actually take care of the children if I'm not there. But we have seen it's a process, but we are seeing this change coming on, and also men actually joining these groups to learn more about what land and housing rights space is all about. Yeah,
that's really good to hear. What are your hopes for the future?
Yeah, my hope for the future is that we can maintain a woman at the center of implementation of these projects, at the center of development, and as well as tag the man along, because I mean, we cannot fully focus on a woman, but we also need support from women, from men and spouses to be able to advance our agenda. I'll give you an example. For instance, you see that in service groups, we have 80% women, but then when they share out, and I've heard this several times from different groups, different members testifying after they share out their money, that they get the money and explain to their husband that this is what it is. And I saved this much, I got this, and this is what I'm planning to contribute to. So it will be something to do with, for instance, home improvement and all. And now we see that because of that messaging, the men are actually changing. So we hope to see more of the woman taking lead, as well as being supported by the male folks. So we hope to see the future that is being led by women and taking, especially in the land and housing space, where we have women also owning properties. So the other challenge is that with the patriarch, I can have money. Yes, we are living in our own home. But then if I can renovate a house and do all manner of improvement, at what expense? If my husband died today, that means relatives can come and grab, including my investment. So already we are seeing this change. And my hope is that women can also get involved, take their position in the land and housing space, which has been a little bit challenging in the Zambian context, but we are hoping that we can have more women accessing their rights in terms of land and housing. Yeah.
That's brilliant to hear. Absolutely fabulous story. That was all the questions that we had, I think. Gemma?
Thank you very much, Nicola, and thank you so much, Ruth. I'm going to hand over now to Anne Myers to introduce herself and talk about her work with the Global Advocacy Team. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anne Myers. I work on Habitat for Humanity International's Government Relations and Advocacy Team as our Senior Director for Advocacy Campaigns. I oversaw our Global Solid Ground campaign, which focused on influencing policies and systems to increase access to land for shelter, and closed in 2020. That campaign had a specific focus on gender equity, given that women are too often systematically denied their right to own land. Yet, when women have security of tenure, it can lead to catalytic investments in their families, their homes, and their broader communities. I currently oversee our U.S. domestic advocacy campaign, Cost of Home, focused on housing affordability. And I'm excited to share with you more about Habitat's new commitment to advocacy focused on equity and informality around the world as we move forward. Around the world, when people are systematically excluded from the processes and institutions that allow for access to formal housing markets, they have no choice but to develop communities informally. Informal settlements are defined by three main criteria: lack of security of tenure, so living in fear of eviction; lack of formal basic services and city infrastructure; and housing that may not comply with building regulations. It's often situated in hazardous areas along riverbanks or on steep slopes and may lack permitting. For women specifically, this can increase barriers to basic services or livelihood opportunities or financing. People in informal settlements, generally women and children, spend significant time when collecting water from public sources far away. A study of 25 countries in sub-Saharan Africa found that women collectively spent at least 16 million hours each day collecting drinking water, compared to 6 million hours for men. Security threats are also present. Women and girls are exposed to risk and the absence of proper bathrooms and as they travel to access water. And having less access to livelihoods and housing finance means a lower probability of owning a home. Women's land rights in many countries are linked to marital status and male family members, putting them at a particular disadvantage. And women are often excluded from decision-making processes, and their needs are not always considered. Our own work, Habitat's own work around the world, informs us of the disproportionate housing challenges facing women. For instance, Habitat for Humanity Brazil shared recent reporting that nearly 2/3 of households in Brazil living in inadequate housing or suffering from the housing deficit are led by non-white and low-income women. In Côte d'Ivoire, Habitat has identified gender inequities, specifically gender-based discrimination and the lack of financing available for women among the main barriers to housing. What's really powerful, in my opinion, is that in our work with local communities, we're seeing these barriers to housing and we're working to address them, not only in our programs, but through scaled solutions by influencing policies and systems. For example, we advocate for participatory slum upgrading that would result in gender responsive solutions and policies that account for the specific needs of women and girls in improving basic services. When displacement is inevitable because of climate change impacts, we advocate for gender-sensitive relocation guidelines, and we advocate for policies that reduce gender inequities in how land is used and controlled. And what does that look like on the ground? Well, Habitat Brazil saw gender inequities among households living in inadequate and unaffordable housing. And with partners, they're advocating for a federal urban infrastructure program to support implementation of basic services and a federal housing program to provide more housing units, increasing supply. In Cambodia and among the Mekong region, Habitat is seeking to undertake activities to gain a better understanding of the causes of gender inequities in land and housing, and to inform systemic changes that Habitat can work to influence. In Paraguay, Habitat's hoping to increase the number of women occupying roles in local decision-making to enhance understanding of local needs, especially around water, sanitation, and hygiene. Habitat Uganda seeks to strengthen land tenure security for women by addressing the lack of implementation of housing policies and specific needs in rural areas where an estimated 90% of the land is not documented. The list goes on, and I'm so glad my colleagues from Zambia and Nepal are sharing with us the great work they're doing and the change they're making happen. We've seen that change is possible, and we're building from past success. In Bolivia, as in many countries, systems and traditions for owning property are weighted against women. Over a decade ago, Habitat for Humanity Bolivia created a school to educate women, and a network of women who graduated from the school developed. As a result of their advocacy, Bolivian law was changed that property must be registered in the name of both spouses. Previously, women's names weren't listed on titles. This legislative change benefits 1.8 million women in Bolivia who now have the right to have their names on property deeds, and it's being replicated in other areas across the region. I mentioned our Solid Ground campaign. Well, Habitat entities and partners in more than 40 countries participated in that campaign and supported policy and systems change, leading to more than 12 million people having increased access to land for shelter. And much of it was focused on gender equity, including work in Lesotho, where legally men and women have equal property rights, but practice generally disadvantages women. For example, if a man died or left his wife, she could find herself disinherited with no home and no recourse. Habitat for Humanity Lesotho has had a program helping families to write wills and strengthen inheritance rights. And under the Solid Ground campaign, they began promoting changes in the legal framework as well. They conducted studies to better understand gender and land policies and systems. Bo Lakoa, Habitat Lesotho's advocacy and fundraising manager, who herself was disinherited when her husband died, said that the studies became the legs they now stand on to conduct their advocacy. They provide an evidence base and open doors for informed dialogue with governments. Policy recommendations from the study, together with stories from people affected by inheritance issues, were disseminated, and they helped build support. Habitat Lesotho, through partnership, trained paralegals in will writing. Women heads of household wrote their wills, protecting inheritance rights for future generations, and women gained leases. Habitat Lesotho is continuing to enhance access to information for communities and advocate for the implementation of policies to improve security of tenure. Policies and systems change doesn't happen overnight, but it can happen. One more success story from solid ground that I'll leave you with is Estella's story. Estella lives in Puerto Cortes, Honduras. She took care of both her grandson, Manuel, and a relative, Victor, who's over 100 years old. They lived in a house that every time it rained, it flooded. They'd have to move all their furniture up on concrete blocks to keep it from being ruined. Estella didn't have proper documentation for her land and therefore no means to upgrade their situation. Through solid ground, Habitat for Humanity Honduras was able to engage residents and other stakeholders in partnership with the city to improve public policies. And as a result, the city made investments in land and housing, and Estella now has a beautiful home. We're building upon a strong foundation as we move forward, and there's a role for everyone to play.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's fascinating just to hear everything that's going on around the world that Habitat is involved in. Obviously, we're doing this for International Women's Day, and it's brilliant to hear the efforts that we're going to improve lives for women and girls. I'm interested to know how many men you're managing to get to advocate on behalf of women as well, and that side of the equation. I'm sure it's not just women fighting for women. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how you're dealing with maybe that friction.
Nicola, I think that's an excellent question. And it, because it can't just be women advocating for women's rights. And things like women's access to land, which I focused heavily on. And we have really good examples from our work in various parts of the world, where a lot of the things like the school for women that I mentioned in Bolivia, there's actually participation by men as well to be trained in the different legalities, different practices that they can help be a part of and be advocates for change as well. And I think that's truly critical as we work towards solutions to engage everyone in being a part of the solution. Thank you for calling that out.
There's so much going on, and there's so much positive movement by the sounds of it. And we've heard from the others Habitat team members. What are your personal hopes for the future?
Well, at a very high level, a more equitable world, where there's less disparity and gender differences. But what I'm personally excited about is the traction that we've seen through our network, to be more intentional in these areas, to begin both looking at what the research and the data is showing, but also digging in on monitoring and evaluation of our own work and being able to be more conscientious about how we're working towards gender inequities, towards addressing gender inequities, and in the work that we do, both through our programs, but from where I sit, from policy solutions specifically. We've seen over the course of years a significant uptick in the amount of our network, the percentage of our network who are really working at a policy and systems level to achieve greater influence and impact through that work. And I think that's really, really inspiring and motivating as we look ahead to think about how we can have an even greater impact on those disparities.
So as well as the grassroots campaigning, you're talking about a top-down approach as well, influencing at the highest level of government. So hopefully the two will meet in the middle and, for the good of everybody.
Absolutely. We use a term a lot when we talk about our work of local to global to local. in that we're able to think about things from a very bottom up approach. Of one of the huge advantages of Habitat's advocacy work is that we are working in local communities, seeing the need, being able to engage local individual residents, and being able to identify what needs need to be addressed and working towards the changes that need to be made. But because of our federated model, we're able to elevate those needs to influence national, regional, global policy that then also in turn is able to have an impact on the ground and help support solutions on the ground as well. And I think that's a really strong suit of Habitat's advocacy efforts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we all know that if you have a secure home, it just improves all different outcomes, whether it's education, health, your impact with the criminal justice system, all of these kind of things come back to whether or not you have somewhere secure to go home to at night and to feel safe and secure. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much, Anne and Nicola. And now we're going to hand over to our final speaker, Elisa. Thank you.
Hello and greetings, everyone. My name is Elisa. I'm privileged to be part of the International Women's Day celebration organized by Habitat for Humanity Great Britain, and I'm very happy that I can bring some of the stories from Nepal to you. Currently, I serve as the National Director for Habitat for Humanity in Nepal. I have a background in environmental science and sustainable resource management. I have over 15 years of experience in development field, which is specialized primarily in program design, partnership, and strategic communication in South and Central Asia. I've been very privileged to be part of many working groups that has also focused on economic empowerment, social empowerment of women in Nepal. And I'm very happy that some of the work we have done as Habitat for Humanity also really promotes women empowerment in Nepal. I recently joined Habitat for Humanity in Nepal, so it's been about 7 months. I've taken the role of overall leadership, programmatic and financial and human resources management. Going into my presentation now, which basically talks about some of the challenges and issues that are faced by women in Nepal and what we as Habitat for Humanity are doing at the field and at policy level to contribute to some extent to minimize these challenges. If you look into these challenges and issues faced by women in Nepal, I think it's no different than what are faced by women all over the world. Some of the deep-rooted patriarchal societal norms and values and policies in Nepal are some of the root causes that limits women's voice and agency in Nepal. If you look into the different kinds of marginalization and limited access to information and resources for women, you also would understand what these discriminatory laws are leading to. If you look into, for instance, some of the policies that are connected to citizenship laws that doesn't give equal rights to men and women to passing their citizenship to their children. For instance, high incidences of gender-based violence, low access to finance, limited ownership of land, restricted movement in terms of when you're an adolescent, disproportionate representation of the informal sector, and higher burden of care. If you see in terms of ranking and what the data suggests, Nepal ranks relatively high in terms of women labor participation, but very low in terms of economic equity. In terms of what women in Nepal face in terms of gender-based violence, about 48% of Nepali women have experienced some kind of gender-based violence, and 66% of these women never report or seek help for any kind of emotional and physical violences. In terms of what happens at the professional level, we see that more men tend to occupy managerial leadership positions and are considered professional in these sectors. Wage inequity remains really high, and unpaid domestic and care work remains unorganized and undervalued in national economy. Similar situations are also seen in terms of political representation, where you see the example of the recent local and national elections. Only 2% of women actually occupy the highest level offices, like mayors and heads of the municipalities, but 91% of women are primarily in deputy positions. When we talk about women empowerment, one of the key areas to talk about is property ownership and land ownership. If you see, in case of Nepal, only 19.7% of women own land, and even in that, only 11% have actual control over these resources. So even if the policy does allow that if you register name under women, you have tax exemptions and you have all kinds of services, but women are unaware of it. And men who know it also sometimes tend to take an advantage. So they don't have an agency or control over land as such, but they're still, under a name of a woman. These attitudes become more prominent and more pronounced when we go to the working areas of Habitat for Humanity in East and West Nepal. If you look into our beneficiary groups, they're primarily low-income families. They're often from more ethnic minority groups, landless people, people who live in substandard shelters, and primarily disaster-prone areas. If you look into some of the southern part of the country, like Madhya, there's a high prevalence of child marriage, as high as 46%. 72% households don't have an access to toilets. I mean, these are all leading to, safeguarding issues for women, their protection, their rights, and so on. If you look into west of Nepal, there are prevalent traditions like chopari, for instance, which is outlawed by laws of Nepal, but actually still being practiced, where women are considered unpure when they're having their period. So they are forced to live in cowsheds or in places outside of their houses in really difficult situations where their incidents of fire hazards are very high, flooding, and they're not safe. They get bitten by a snake. They're even raped during these periods. There are a lot of sexual and reproductive health issues and so on. So, even if we're trying to do a lot of things, there you see that these are engraved challenges that are faced by women. We also see some of the issues such as, men being very, men disagreeing to the issues of women land ownership. They don't like it when we talk about joint land titles in some of our project areas. I mean, this in turn results in lower confidence for women, and they tend to agree that, okay, we don't need any kind of property. It's okay that somebody else manages things for us, money for us, and so on. So as you see, at different levels, the women, the inequity faced by women tends to, remain dire. There are still a lot of things that we need to do to make sure that we address these inequities. So if I come down to what does Habitat do in terms of addressing these inequities in our work? So within Habitat, we are consciously trying that we make effort towards inclusive and diverse workforce. So, we have more women in leadership positions. We invest in building a positive organizing culture and awareness. We operationalize a healthy and safe workplace for men and women equally. We also are working on strengthening our safeguarding and JESI policies, not just us, but also for local partners we work with, the consultants we work with, the volunteers we bring in here in our country. So that's really our biggest priority. From program point of view, what Habitat does is we're trying to improve habitability. That is, also improving awareness. We are working on improving tenure security through joint land titles. We are lobbying with government in our construction programs on how we can make safe spaces for women, how we can improve access to basic services. For instance, we are also trying to promote gender-friendly spaces in our construction designs. We are trying to make sure that, our constructions help in ensuring privacy and safeguarding and minimizing violence and harassment for young girls and women. So, everything we do in our work, we just don't look at gender being mainstream, but we want to also work in a gender transformative way where we address all the barriers and where we work towards minimizing all the incidences that women and girls might face. In designing affordable homes, we are also creating safe, resilient, and secure places to live for girls and women. So, as a part of construction, we also train a lot of women as masons. They can be part of the construction. They take pride on that. In my field visit, I also see that a lot of local level groups are actually led by women. So there are also women leaders who have come up as a result of our awareness programs and so on. And then we've also worked on policy recommendation where we, work in through land diagnostic with other partners. there have been a lot of positive gains as a result of our work. As you can see here, a lot of women economic empowerment, social empowerment has been a result of housing microfinance program. As you see, 60% of decisions on whether to undertake housing improvements, what kind of improvements, and where to spend money are actually jointly taken by husband and wife. A lot of home improvement through housing loans have improved the education of girls in our project areas. There are positive signs where 88% of girl respondents have reported a positive impact on their education of housing improvement, when they get appropriate place to study. And as a part of our initiative, 158 joint land titles have been distributed to families that Habitat has supported. So you can see that they not only belong to men, but also are equally under ownership of women. If I have to celebrate women's achievement this International Women's Day, I think there are a lot of things that I can be very proud of, myself being a woman, and all the kind of things we do at our own workforce and the inspiration we get from the women in the communities we work in. If you see at our own workforce at Habitat for Humanity Nepal, almost 35% of our staff are women. We need to get better at this, I understand. But of that 35%, almost 88% colleagues serve as officers, managers, coordinators, senior managers, and also the senior management team. And they have a leading role in construction, financial management, and field operations. Some of the women leaders I have met in the community are champions who have defied all the odds. They have had problems, their husbands have migrated abroad, they're single breadwinners, some of them are single women, but they have defied all odds. They're actually, risen from adversities. They're raising their children, their daughters, to be more powerful and more, more empowered and to lead their own lives. And these are some of the women that I take my inspiration from. And I really feel that as a women, as half the sky, we're capable to do so much more. And I really, in this International Women's Day, really want to inspire women like me, women around me, and to get an inspiration from them to do even better in what I do each day and every day, to raise agency and voice for other women.
Thank you so much, Elisa. Thank you for being here today and for sharing these insights and sort of inspirational messages about the work that you're doing. I just wondered if I could ask you a little bit more about the programs that the Nepal Habitat team are implementing in support of some of these issues that you've talked about, like the financial inclusion, for example.
I think one of the projects that we really take pride about and that's making substantial gains at the field is our project that's being funded by Jersey Overseas Aid. It's a project basically focusing on financial inclusion and access for women. So basically focusing a lot on financial literacy and their access to finances, on making household decisions. And one of the biggest gains we have seen is that, women feel very empowered to make these decisions. They feel like, they are the ones who are making these changes at household level, at community level. They know what to invest on. They know what to spend on. So it's not just about, understanding where they can get finances for their home building or for their incremental repairment, but also in general, why do they need to save? How do they need to wisely spend? For instance, there was a beautiful meeting where they said, I would invest on education and not invest on a new clothes, for instance. The education of my girl child is more important. So it is really powerful on how you make changes at foundational level, how you inspire them to do it themselves, to become leaders of their own. So I think this is very, very inspiring. We also see at community level a growing support of their male counterparts, for instance. Some of the women, they also lead some of the, women groups and some of the financial literacy classes. They're really trained on that. So the men also take pride in that sense. So I also feel like through our work, we can also involve, because without having men on the, on the active role, I don't think we can make changes. So I think that with the support of their male counterparts, they're able to even do more than what they want to do. So they feel more confidence. They feel like, no, this is our domain and we can do much more. So that's kind of a positive change that we have seen in the field, Gemma.
And they're really centered and leading on that.
Yes, they are very much. And, sometimes I also ask myself, we can only do so much when we bring in men and women and the community together for this, because it's not just about, doing as a project short-term things, but changing mindset. I think moving the entire community to a direction where we say that, you know, women leadership is crucial, women leadership is instrumental. When you empower women, you empower a community, you empower a generation, right? And I think with an organizing and with an awareness that we have to work together, there's a lot of scope. Even when we work at my office level, even within our own office spaces, we receive immense support from our male colleagues. We see that they want us to, you know, really develop, grow forward, and take leadership and so on. And I think it's a matter of changing this and changing everything at homes, at schools, at communities, and at offices. And I think that's what all that matters.
Thank you, Elisa.
Thank you, Gemma.
Wow, well, what a collection of amazing women we've just heard from. Thank you so much to Ruth, to Anne, and to Elisa. You are just so inspiring, and I feel so privileged to have heard your stories and got to know you all just that little bit more. I hope everybody listening today has had the same feeling as I have, and are going away from this session feeling inspired and energized to keep going with whatever it is, the challenge that you face. I think the important thing about International Women's Day is that we elevate and we amplify our voices. So if I could ask you all one thing, if you go away from this event, could you please share our International Women's Day posts across your social media channels? I'm not going to read out all the places we are. We've got a slide that's coming up after I finish speaking, which will show you all our social media channels where you can find us if you don't follow us already. So please do share the message out high and wide. It's such an important message, and I think you agree we want to really reach as many people as possible. And when I'm asking you to do something, the other call to action I have really is if you're in the UK and you would like to be more involved, we currently have some vacancies on our board of trustees. So if you've ever thought about becoming a charity trustee, you weren't sure what it was about, please get in touch with myself or Gemma after this, and we can send you out a trustee pack. I'd be more than happy to have a chat with anybody informally to give you a better idea of what it's like. It's a very friendly board. I'm delighted to chair it, and I just want more people on it who care as passionately as we do. So with that in mind, I'm going to let you carry on with your days. I know everybody is incredibly busy just now. So thank you again to Ruth, Anne, and Elisa for your contributions. Thank you to Gemma for organising the event, and thank you all for listening. Enjoy the rest of your International Women's Day. Bye-bye.